Be here tonight, and I'd like to introduce our esteemed guest, Sandy Chu. Sandy is a principal that's based in our New York City office, and she also serves as the national business leader for our China business group. She's a fellow member of the Chartered Certified Accountants in the UK, as well as the Hong Kong Institute of Certified Public Accountants. She got her degree from the University of North London. How many people can say they got their degree from North London? No. Just making sure you're still awake, that's great. So, by the way, her degree was a Bachelor of Arts in Accounting and Finance, and she graduated with honors. She's written extensively on China. Before joining our firm, she headed up the China Business Group for another international accounting firm. I want to thank Reagan. Reagan is going to be our fact checker tonight. He allowed us to do kind of a rough draft of this presentation earlier today. And Reagan, if we get it wrong, just let us know, okay?
Sure thing.
We tend to see that at the end of every year when China institutes some exchange control requirements, and it becomes very difficult to get your money back out of China. So, what is it? Is China really positioning to be a global leader, or are they putting their people first?
China would do everything necessary to make China be the best. And China would do everything that would benefit domestically in China. Just like our new president. He announced he would people first. So China would definitely going for global. China has been relaxing all the foreign investment rules in China, welcoming foreign investors to go into China. And that has been done ever since they became member of WTO. China come from a long way since almost 40 years ago. I'm being in US and China, being looked after the trade and businesses between these two biggest countries in the world. I've seen China definitely have relaxed since he first opened his door. No doubt about it. And every year their investment rules relaxations, their incentive provisions come out. There are more downward delegation from authorities, from central government to the provincial government, the relaxation on the company setup. A lot of things has really made it easier for foreign investors. Foreign investors continue to have challenges, just like anybody operating in a foreign country. Just like I would hear often, the Chinese company here in the United States, so difficult to do business in the US. I heard both sides. Their failures or challenges got to have the specific circumstances. Of course, largely, China is a developing country, have foreign exchange controls. Their controls movements will fluctuate depending on economic status in China, depending on their current accounts, depending on their GDP. That's only one of the few things they could do towards the end of the year, the beginning of the next year. Always that feel of tightening of foreign exchange controls. But you have many other months during the year that you can bring your investment out of China to anywhere else in the world. One more thing. Over the last particular, say, 5 years or so, China have encouraged a lot of Chinese companies to go out to invest. US is one of the best or top destination for Chinese investors. 2016 alone have about 25 or 26 billions, 3 times more than 2015. Through that investment, this number was official number. It could be more because China have recognized that a lot of money have left China to a destination that never returned. Not all 100% of the transaction left China never returned, but there are large amounts that are rising the attention of the Chinese government. So therefore, they feel they need to control the China outflow to the rest of the world. But with that practice, I believe that that's also a temporary measure.
Well, as we look at China, right, they're flexing their muscle much more on the world stage. right? They're building islands in the South China Sea, barrier islands, much to the chagrin of their neighbors. They have unveiled their first aircraft carrier, right, which was released last fall. And they seized a U.S. underwater drone. So what do you think their end game is? Is it economics, or do you think it's territorial?
I think both. Definitely both. Nobody have really, in the world stage, challenged China for going to South China Sea. They continue to make efforts to build until our new president. The economic state, China have known to the world that they want to reform the economy, and they have been doing pretty successfully. And they continue to manage the GDP rate in a 6% level, the last 3 quarters 6.7. Not many countries in the world right now, with the 1.3 billion of population, can manage such a high GDP rate. We are in the US, 3%? 2%? It seems pretty robust. Nobody would have the heart of a job like the president of China, managing 1.3 billion of people, which is 4 times bigger than the US. So definitely the end game is that China want to be global. China want to be a mature, developed country. And China want to provide a better living for their populations. There's a huge middle class coming up. Who's going to take care of them? So China government need a lot of help. Internal help is not enough. So they need to go out. That's why the policy came down. Everybody want to go out to learn and adapt and to share. At the same time, keep inviting, motivating, encouraging foreign investment to go to China to set up plants, set up companies, and make there and sell to the Chinese domestic market. Many of the companies have been transformed from going to China, taking the cheap labor workforce, and then bringing the goods out of China, to a stage today, more and more companies going to China, set up their companies there, and sell to the Chinese market for the one reason, because of the 1.3 consumer market. In order to be successful, like any other country doing business in any countries, to be successful, you gotta go into the country and be in there, have your own people on the ground doing the actual work. So the end game, obviously, for China to become a much better country and can help and have a sustainable growth for years to come.
Well, this 2017 is a big year for China. It's their selection year when every 5 years, right? The 350 odd members of the Central Committee, along with its decision-taking subsets, the Politburo, the Standing Committee, and the Army's Ruling Council are all elected. And granted, this is a cumbersome and elaborate process, not probably similar to what the US has just gone through in the last year. And it culminates with the Congress meeting in either October or November. So do you have any prediction? Are there going to be any changes to the party's constitution, the makeup of the Politburo? Do you think they're going to continue to take a hard stance on the Hong Kong dissidents?
Yes, 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 yes.
I ask easy questions.
This is the time around March of this year. Typically, we will know in China who may be the next president. That's typical what happened. There was some noise and talks on the social media about who may be the potential candidate a few months back, but a few months later it has been quiet. That message means that the current president either have not had someone in mind or he's want to go for another 4 years. He definitely go for another 4 years until 2020. The question is, would he continue beyond 2020, or someone else will step in. He had really ambitious plan for China. And all the 4 years so far, he did one thing, very important, is to crack down on corruptions. And that has been very significant, very successful, but that affects the GDP. That affects everything we're talking about here. The civil servants not doing anything have the top performance rating. If you do something, you get yourself in trouble. You go to high-end restaurants, there's no businesses anymore because there's no parties hosting. You don't see people going to shop at the international brands, the flagship stores in China. Because all these corruption practices that have been taking on for the last 4 years, really widespread. So up to this point, people view that that has been very successful, but it's hurting the economy in general.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the economy. I think you mentioned that the growth for the first 3 quarters, and probably likely to be the growth for all of 2016, 6.7. Last year we discussed that the economy has been slowing after decades of really significant growth. So 6.7 is the slowest growth in 25 years. And that required government intervention and loosened liquidity, right? There's a lot of concern about China's real estate bubble, overcapacity of the heavy industry sector, and slow reform in the services sector. So, and as well as rising debt. So where do you see the economy going for 2017?
6.7 is pretty strong. Who has that 6.7%? With this mega country, with this size of population, 6.7 is really outstanding. And of course, China has been undergoing a transformation from a manufacturing to service industry, of improving and the middle class coming up, changing of cost of living, all that. So I think that China have a lot of domestic issues, have a lot of issues they need to resolve. Not all of them have a solutions, but there are things that China could do, and they will do it in trying to manage that. If China said, the government set on a 6.6% in the fourth quarter, they will deliver the 6.6% for the fourth quarter. For all the past GDP rates, you notice that whatever they say, they always deliver. Maybe they miss a couple of points sometimes. So the economics in China, I think that would continue to be very promising because there continue to be more and more FDI going to China. So this year, 2016, FDI in China actually looks pretty good compared to 2015 figures. That tells us that still China is attracting a lot of foreign investment in the Chinese market. That is really going to help. At the same time, there are Chinese companies going out to the world to buy companies to set up and to bring back the technology and know-how, all the soft skills that China is lacking. So to continue, I feel that the economy continue to reform and evolve. I don't think it reached the bottom yet, but certainly I don't believe that in the next quarter or next year we have a dramatic reduction from the 6.7. Now, with one caveat, this all depending upon how our new president will do.
One prediction I heard was probably closer to 6.4 in 2017 and maybe 6.1 in 2018. Do you think those are probably realistic numbers?
My crystal ball tells me yes.
So you made a really good point there about China's search for knowledge, right? And one of the issues and challenges that many U.S. companies have is intellectual property. And when they have sent it to China, it never comes back, right? It goes somewhere. So do you see any crackdown on or protection of IP coming into China?
China have changed a lot in this area. We used to be hearing from our clients in the US, not even talking about putting any kind of IPs as early as 20 years ago. But now, we're talking to a lot of US clients of thinking about how to put the IP in China for the IP usage for the Chinese domestic consumer market. The IP in production, the trademark, the patent for the domestic consumption sellings. So that tells me that foreign investors have more confidence for putting the IPs to the Chinese market. On the other hand, China have developed more robust rules and regulations to protect. If you go to Shenzhen, 20 years ago, you would see the famous brands selling for 10% of the market selling price for a handbag. But nowadays, you don't see that so widespread in Shenzhen. There are still people doing that, but it's much more smaller scale and much more discreet. You weren't able to find on the street picking up any Rolex watch in Shenzhen. You may need to find them because they may be hidden only for known needed basis. That people will find them, or through introduction, you will find them to buy those. It's hard to find these days in the market for the technology, or that because of the policy improvements in China. Because the foreign investors have been more and more confident for sending the IP over to China, I think the issue over eventually will be less of a concern.
You mentioned last year was a milestone for Chinese investment in the United States. I mean, I do have some statistics here for Merger Market where it said the Chinese companies invested a total of over $51 billion in the United States via 65 deals. That's a 360% surge from 2015, and it accounted for about 12% of all inbound M&A in the United States, which was up from 2% in 2015. So a number of lawmakers here in the United States have expressed their concern to the Department of Treasury, urging stepped-up authority for the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States. Given the growing rancor for protectionism in the U.S. under Trump and more stringent capital controls, what do you think is the outlook for continued Chinese investment in the United States?
For certain, in my view, China will continue to invest in the United States. China really love the United States. They admire, and it's their dream. The freedom, dream of the freedom, the dream of the technologies, the skills they have. China will continue to come to US for investment. However, the number of deals will be decreased, at least next year, in my view. The reason being, China would really want to control and find out and close the loophole for those money coming out of China to the rest of the world. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of money left China and never returned, or they left China for the one reason, but they never achieved or delivered that reason. So in other words, it was very easy for people to invest overseas outside of China. As long as you know somebody, or you know somebody in official, it's much easier, it has to be much easier to buy a few $1 million, a couple of $1 million of properties or companies for that reason. But once the money arrived in the United States, it wasn't used for that purpose when they originally declared into China. They ended up maybe ended up in the stock exchange market, maybe ended up just putting other investments tools in the United States, or maybe just living in a saving bank account. So China recognized a lot of so-called improper transactions. So therefore, by holding on the wire transfer from China to the United States or the rest of the world is really want to contain and try to control, and in the meantime figure out the solution how to deal with this, and at the same time have introduced a series of policies for reporting, so that, for example, the banks receive an application for wire transfer, for investment, for wire transfer of money from China to United States. The bank nowadays is obligated to report to upper authority of their transactions. Now, if the transaction is so big and the bank is also skeptical about the investment intention, the bank will not do it because they would not want to take the risk. So therefore, if those improper so-called transactions were no longer in existence in 2017, because they weren't able to come out, then we left with are the real deals. The real deal is real investments, coming from the SOEs perhaps, coming from largest listed private companies for real intention investment purposes. So therefore, I think that the deals quantity will be reduced, but the quality of the acquisition in the United States or the Greenfield project will continue to come.
Let's talk a little bit about currency, right? Because Trump believes that China is, the biggest currency manipulator in the world. China institutes this exchange control requirement in November, right, to help shore up the RMB, which has fell 6% against the US dollar in 2016. So two-pronged questions to you. One, I think you kind of answered that you think that those exchange control requirements, people may want to know that, yeah, maybe they're temporary, but they could come back in the fall again. But where do you see the currency against the US dollar? Do you think that the Chinese government will continue to have it run lower than it should if it was pegged to the US dollar?
The perception of China being the currency manipulator, really, China never admitted doing that. I do believe that the currency of yen in China will continue to be strong, but not immediately. There's no incentive for China to make the currency cheap. One of the reasons is that China does not really need or want to rely on export. If they want to make the currency very cheap, the only one of the great reasons is that they want to encourage exports. But China doesn't really think that they need to rely on export, because they have transformed from a manufacturing stage to a service stage. And in fact, they want more investment to go in China to help their economy, to improve the quality of lives. So therefore, in fact, they want more and more investors going to China and serve the Chinese market. So in the long run, I don't think China would want the currency to be treated as a very cheap and undervalued.
All right, can you call our president and let him know that? So this week, Trump pulled out of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, right? Mostly symbolic. Obama, 8 years to negotiate it, never put it to the vote in the Senate, because I don't think he thought that he had the vote. So although perceived as being less than ideal, right, many pundits thought that this, by pulling out, that it's going to really lessen our influence, right? That this was really intended to thwart China's influence, especially in that part of the world, and now we backed out and said, no, we're not going forward with this. So many pundits are saying, gosh, you played right into China's hands, and now they're going to step up and be a much more player in that region, that part of the world. You agree?
I don't know. You see, U.S. spent so many years, right, in these negotiation efforts. And it's supposed to be helping the U.S. in order to control the power of China in Asia. It's supposed to be a beneficial arrangement for the U.S. But the president had backed out of it. I actually do not understand the reason of it. Could be that he wants to use it as a leverage to renegotiate to get more deals or to get better deals. Certainly at this point, I don't know if China would be interested in joining, or China has shown interest as I understand it, but I don't know that how the whole PPT will turn out at the moment. Lots of members in the original PPT have all in the shock stage, right, the state of shock, that having spent 8 years and US back out, if US is no longer in it, there could be no meaning of having this PPT going forward. So I just don't know how they're going to be turn out, whether China will negotiate again, or China will come in.
Well, that's what the thought is, that China now will step in and perhaps grab the role that the U.S. was intended to fill, and they'll be the big guy in the deal.
We'll see, because I don't believe our president will back out altogether, because it's really for the benefits. So, you know, hopefully our president have another plan in his mind that he wants to continue. You know, I know it's every hour changes, right? You know, I am just hoping for the best, that the president will basically have another plan to go forward with.
Yeah, and perhaps the Great Wall of China is what he's using as the basis for the Great Wall of Mexico. So finally, and we want to leave some time for some questions from the audience as well, but I've got to ask you, 2017, it's the year of the fire rooster, right? We know the rooster is the epitome of fidelity and punctuality. People are supposed to be much more polite and less stubborn. Martin, please take note of that. But they will have a tendency to complicate things. So what do you think the year of the rooster has in store?
I feel that 2017 will be quite a interesting year. Be prepared for all the ups and downs. The fact that China government really doesn't understand the U.S. new president very well.
Yeah, I don't think anybody does.
He's just joined the club. So he's reading him, he's trying to read him, trying to understand what he's getting at, what is going to be the next move. And given his lack of, he wasn't in, U.S. president wasn't in political space. There wasn't really much in the world stage that China can read upon on and learn from about him. So it's really, he's a new person, and China trying to understand. So therefore, for all those that you mentioned, the phone call, the drone, the comments, China taking a very grace attitudes and positions towards that, partly because he wasn't the president officially, so it doesn't mean representing the United States government's point of view. So China sort of stand up to say, I'm very grace, I'm very generous, I'm not going to fight with you because of little comments or little act. So he trying to perceive that he's a mature adult to deal with situations like this. But if U.S. had pressed on the touching areas, like the One China policy or South China Sea, that is not something China would tolerate. Now, for those whose interest in knowing who's in the fire of rooster, maybe a shower some years. I don't think I need to start in 1933, right? 1945, 1957, 1969, perhaps I can go one more number, 1981. Those people who were born in those years are in the fire of rooster. I don't think there's anyone here in 1993.
Yeah, they
Oh,
are.
that's one? Oh, sorry. How about 2005? I don't think there's anyone here, right? Not allowed. So, fire rooster only come in every 50 years?
I think it's 60.
Come in every 60 years.
Yeah,
You're probably
so
right.
rooster comes in every 12 years, and then the fire rooster is 60.
So it's very special. It's very special, and usually those people born in those years, in the years of fire rooster, will have greatest impact. I don't know the impact means negatively or positively. Thank you.
It could be either. All right, well, let's open it up to any questions that the audience
Yes,
might
I'd
have.
like to comment, please, if I may. Thank you for a very enlightening commentary. But I think you missed the entire issue that most of us have. Because as a small company, we're not interested in what the investment is in China or what China is investing in the U.S. What we really want is a very simple, open border relationship where we can produce our products and ship to China without all the regulations that are imposed upon us, just like we have the Chinese product that comes to the U.S. And you have not addressed that issue tonight. And I think that's critically important to all of us. We want to do business with China, but it is not easy. It is not receptive for an American company to do business in China. And I'm sorry, I'm here fuming at the discussion that doesn't address the primary issue. I'm not a strong supporter of Trump. By the same token, the relationship between what China allows for us doing business with China is very different from what we allow China to do business in the U.S. And I wish you would address that particular issue, because that's crucial to most of us in this room.
Well, we can clearly address it. Obviously, it's the central government that's controlling those regulations.
China have lowered the tariffs over the years. China have lowered its customs duties over the years. China have lifted and relaxed the quota into and out export over the years. So we really need to look at the specific products that you're referring to and trying to bring into China. We hear a lot of times that difficulty in bringing to China is because at the customs border, the harmonization code wasn't coded right, or the custom duty rate was not right. So depending on the type of products, maybe you could share with us what specific type of products that you are trying to get at and what kind of specific issues that you have.
I'd be happy to share specific products with you. We're balloon manufacturers. Very simply, we bring raw latex in, we produce balloons, and we're interested in servicing the needs of the Chinese marketplace. It is not a level playing field, pure and simple. And I think until such time as the Chinese government understands the frustration of American business and trying to do business in China, we're not going to reach any kind of reasonable relationship because it is totally one-sided. And until we understand that there is a misbalance, we're just talking over everybody's head. I don't care what the investment is from China to the U.S. or U.S. into China. But unless we understand that there is not a level playing field, we're just talking over each other.
Yeah, but let me address that, right? Because you're going to China because you have 1.3 billion potential customers in China, right? China knows that. So they believe they have the leverage because they have a much larger consumer market, and people are still going over there, notwithstanding the difficulties in doing business there.
That's what I believe also the case. You go to China because you see the opportunities in China. China cannot please everybody in the world. just not possible. It's an emerging market. It's learning from the Western world. It's learning from the US. It's learning from Europe. It's learning from everybody in the world. And I don't think that it's widespread. There will be issues, but certainly if the item is sensitive, I still don't know what issue specifically that you have difficulty at the border bringing the products in. Is it because you cannot bring it in, or because the rate was too high? Or was it just, I still don't clear the issue was.
I think the conversation is better off stage and go on to other people, because this is very specific, but it's very real.
Fair enough. After the presentation, we'll spend a couple minutes with you. What other questions do you have?
I have a question. It took Germany and Japan about 25 to 30 years to come back with a current account balance and a trade balance. For Japan to be this, at that time, the largest foreign reserves. In 7 years, China has 3.3, Hong Kong has 3.7, together almost 4 trillion. What's the impact of this on business people here? I conclude, you ain't seen nothing yet.
Remember last year when I answered the first question I asked you? I think Dermot answered his own question.
It's almost 4 trillion.
4 trillion.
What's the impact on the business here? Who is the largest exporter? And Walmart is one of the top 10 exporters from China. So why can't these people do it?
Talking about trade balance.
Answer this, please.
No, you can go ahead.
It's a professor's question.
You know, these are obviously very complicated issues here. You know, you talk about Walmart. Why Walmart going to China? Because it's much cheaper. They cannot find it anywhere else in the world. Can help them to bring the cheapest products back home and still have a margin to make. Now, obviously, they could go to Vietnam, Indonesia, and other countries, but that's not possible. It's not going to happen in a short period of time. Because China really have a systematic way of being a manufacturing powerhouse for many years. The quality has been so well that really over time, in a short period of time, nobody can do the same as what China has been done.
Sorry, I'm going to interrupt. The only reason I'm interrupting is because we are a service and latex balloons to Walmart. Walmart can go to China and buy balloons at our price that is far lower than what we produce. And so I'm sorry, I'm going to argue with you. And Walmart wants more than just cheap. Walmart needs service. Walmart needs all the things. We've been a service to latex balloons in China for 30 years. And so I'm going to argue, I'm not arguing, I'm going to stand up and say, I'm sorry, I know there are huge companies in this room that are far bigger than we are. Okay? And we do have a disadvantage to Chinese balloons coming into our country because they do come in at a far lower price. And the only thing we can do to combat that is service and quality. And so Walmart can buy from China any day they want. But for some reason, you know, we have to be strong here too. Thank you.
Excuse me, I'd like to follow up, if you don't mind, on this note. I believe this young lady is employed by Grant Thornton, are you not? I don't believe this lady is a representative of the Chinese government. And I think yelling at her and giving her a hard time when she's here to teach us how to do business with China is inappropriate. So give the girl a break, okay? Having said that, however,
I knew that was coming.
I counsel you. Your presentation is condescending towards China, and it makes people think that you are representing China and selling the Chinese philosophy.
Here,
so
here.
tone that down a little bit, otherwise you're going to get a few more people mad at you, thinking that you're representing China. And I mention that because I love China. It's my home. I was brought up there, all right? And I do business there. And they managed to make me enough money to put my kids through college and such like. But at the same time, let's not forget and let's not fail to recognize, gentlemen, that there's two words that are in the Chinese agenda. And that's world domination. Chinese are looking for world domination economically and political influence. They've done an excellent job of bullying a lot of countries, not least of which is Vietnam, Malaysia, Philippines. They have done an excellent job of giving two fingers reversed in the English style to the world international courts when they ruled about the South China Islands. The South China Islands, if anybody was to take a picture of the South China Islands and look at the location. We all know about this conversation about China and the South China Islands, building a military base on it, but how many of us actually looked at a map of where these islands are? I counsel everybody to do that. The Chinese, if they want something, they're not afraid to bully their way into it and challenge us to do something about it. One of the things you said earlier was, you hope our current president does challenge them, because as of now, you said nobody has challenged China on the South China Island issue. Well, that was incorrect, of course, because the international courts ruled against them. All right? The point is, China can be our friend, and sometimes you keep your enemies closest. All right? And that's what China can represent. They can be very close to us by us working with them, not against them. But I do counsel everybody from a political point of view, not from an economic point of view. China's into world domination, and they have the biggest influences in the Africas, they have the biggest influences in the Latin Americas, and they are trying to influence what's going on in this country because of all the foreign investment that's coming in here. All right? They're very, very smart people, but this is a political thing for them. We in this room here represent the commercial community, and that's what we need to focus on. But let's not forget for a minute that China's not into world domination. They want influence, they want power, they want to be what they believe they're entitled to be, and have, as of yet, not achieved it. My apologies.
No, Mark, we appreciate your thoughts. I think my mic might have gone out. Appreciate your thoughts. Again, this is intended to be an outlook discussion, right? We're not up here espousing any type of political view. We're not. It's really just an outlook. And your comment about that nobody has challenged China, you're right, they lost on the internet, right? Philippines took them there. But what were the ramifications? They still have their islands, and nobody has tried to prevent them from continuing to expand. So it's a symbolic stoppage, right?
You know, Mark, also, you know, thank you for your comment about suggesting me to tone down. Maybe...
I apologize if you're offended, but...
No, I'm not offended. You know, as you may know from the newspapers, Hong Kong don't get along with mainland China. And I can use the word, they hate each other, right? So I wouldn't say here to tell you I'm representing China because I'm from Hong Kong.
Excuse me, I know you're not representing China, and I know you're from Hong Kong also, and I'm from Hong Kong too. My comment was simply, you come across a little bit like representing China.
I wouldn't be qualified.
True.
Because I'm from Hong Kong.
I would hope not.
I'd like to kind of divert this back to it's hard to distinguish between the political and the economics when we're talking here. And you have peripherally touched on the one China policy. I'd like to explore that economically from a little deeper perspective, in that I believe that the Trump administration is going to move to normalize relationships with Taiwan. I believe that's going to happen. you've said that's not good, or there'll be what do you believe will be the ramifications of a normalization of relations with Taiwan? China needs to grow up and understand that Taiwan is recognized across the world as an entity. We do massive defense business with Taiwan. And I'd like to know what you as economic analysts believe will be the outcome of normalizing relations with Taiwan.
You know, I don't think both presidents really have a clear plan. If one president does something, how the other side will respond. I honestly don't think that, because nobody would believe what actually will happen. I certainly myself don't want this to happen, because it affects everybody, not just people in these two countries, but people in the world. So obviously Taiwan, this current leader, or people call president, very in favor of being independent, away from China. China always won't let it go. Now, if our president here continue to pursue, I don't know what actions he able to take to interfere. He can continue to sell arms. U.S. has been selling arms to Taiwan. Can continue to do it. But at the same time, if he continue to help Taiwan to be independent, I honestly don't know how China will react and take any actions against the U.S. I honestly do not believe that they will go to any war, any kind of war, trade war will be. But I really don't think that they will come to that point. There will be a lot of negotiation. There will be a lot of talks, hopefully agreeing on a mutually respected and compromised position at the end. And the leader in Taiwan, she just got selected last year, 2016. So our presidents this year, so if the continuation of mutually respectful, continue to dialogue, we don't know if she will continue the next term. There will be another person from another party will come up. Then it may change the dynamic of the relationship between what we're talking about here. It's very fluid. I don't think any one of us in this room have the answer. We can always think about what may happen, but I don't have a suggestion to say what China may do if U.S. have pursued on that area.
Thank you. That's the answer I might have expected. Thank you.
It seems as though manufacturing work moves between Mexico and China depending on the cost of doing business. In the 80s and the early 90s, a lot of work moved to Mexico, and then it seemed like the Mexican prices became higher and the work moved to China from Mexico. It was all work that ended up here. More recently, it seems as though people have recognized the total cost of doing business in China, and much of that work has moved back to Mexico. If there's a 34% tax placed on work coming from Mexico, it seems as though the beneficiary of that is China. Yeah. Is that logical thinking?
Could be, but there are other places like Vietnam, Indonesia, Malaysia. There are a lot of other countries, Southeast Asia, that can do cheaper of a job. Now, it's coming back on, China has been doing this for at least 40 years, right, close to 40 years. So they already have trained and have a systematic way of being how to manufacture at a very efficient way. Anybody else can adapt and ship, but it will take time. It will take a number of years to get to the point that where can fully take over. And I do believe that China doesn't really want to be doing primarily export. I don't think that's China's intention. China really wants is to make in China and sell in China, just like the United States. Make in China and sell, make in US and sell in the US.
Ms. Jennifer, you have a question? Ms. Jennifer, you had your hand up. No?
I'm going to change the subject a little bit. In the course of my lifetime, we've seen China go through some changes that my parents would not have thought would be possible. Some of the strongest industries, some of the strongest sectors in China at this time are the state-owned enterprises, as you have mentioned. Is there any chance of privatization of these huge companies in the future that you foresee?
Huge companies refer to SOEs?
Yes.
Are you asking the question SOEs?
Yes, could they be privatized?
China have recently tried to privatize the SOEs, not widespreadly. They have tried maybe on a sampling basis, but failed. Certainly, SOE is the government, and they have a lot of assets. We just don't know if they are in a positive position or they are in a negative position. There's a lot of issues about the SOEs, right? That they have a lot of money and they can use in any way they want, and they have invested overseas. We don't know where the money gone. So therefore, Chinese government have enforced a number of policies to report those foreign investments. Because China's central government also concerned about the assets being misused or got eaten up. That going back tied to the corruption enforcement crackdown in China for the last 8 years or so. So certainly if China government, I believe, if they want to privatize and they could privatize, they would do it. Because it's really, I believe it's really one of the key problems, and that is giving China the burdens on economically and financially.
I may want to add the comment for Roger's question. If you see the gyration of the oil price, every time the oil price goes up, industries go to Mexico. Then when oil was found in all over Africa, the cheapest oil was in Africa. They subsidized it. So business people, they want what? To make a profit. So where do they go? Home? Simple truth. Like eggs. Just a comment.
Can I ask a sporting question? Because I know there's a lot of golfers in this room. In China recently, this last week, following on from something they did a year ago, seized and closed down 111 golf courses under the, well, not to be cynical, I was going to say under the guise of, but using the accusation that the lands that the golf courses were built on were illegally obtained, and other such things. Is it an anti-corruption move, or is it a bit of a sort of social protection program that they're going through? They don't want the Chinese to be too westernized, so it's a de-westernizing of the social life in China and bringing them back, perhaps grounding them a little bit more.
I think a lot of it does have to do with the corruption. There's a perception that all those people who are playing golf, right, that's an expensive sport even in China. And the only way that people could do it was through ill-gotten gains, through corruption.
No government officials are being told they can't play golf anymore, and that's not sending a message to the people.
Well, it's the same government officials, right, who were probably the ones that were corrupt.
Yeah, I agree too, because a part of the corruption crackdown, because during the 15 years, around 10, 15 years ago, golf was really a big hit in China then. That was really first started. And that was the time that land wasn't that expensive compared to last recent years. So therefore, as long as you have some kind of relationship arrangements, you may able to obtain the lands and then use it on your purposes. So I wouldn't be surprised that it wasn't, those lands was obtained through some kind of improper or special arrangements. And now, another reason could be that China government want to reorganize or redevelop their planning zone, the area. So maybe those golf courses were sitting in certain area that they want to redevelop for another purposes. So they want to take back and redevelop. Relocation also been happening.
Norma, it's almost 9.
Keep your New Year's
Can I follow up on the land question?
Sure, we'll take one more question there, Mark.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
I was in Taipei in 1979 when Carter abrogated the treaty. I was in the U.S. Air Force, and I've never been more embarrassed in my entire life. More importantly, I got to spend 4 days in the Grand Hotel, and we drank the bar dry, and then they let us go. Sorry, go ahead. Is China communist or capitalist? Which is it?
I think Sandy's going to say yes.
You can understand the systemic confusion in that question.
Yeah, yeah.
It is a market-based economy that is centrally controlled.
Yeah. It's a nightmare.
Figure that one out. Yeah, Aiden.
To give you one unobtrusive answer to that question, there are only 6 golf courses in all of China that are privately owned in any way, shape, or form. They're not reclaiming land because they already own it. And one golf course that I'm quite familiar with, the 36 holes, they went in, closed it, tore up 2, and left the rest alone. China doesn't do things without a plan downstream.
My land question, if I may, just for conversation. So I was there again recently, and I was told something that I don't know if it's right. And I'm asking you this question as if you're representing China, and I apologize. All right?
How could I?
You may not have the answer to this question because it is a Chinese question.
I wouldn't want to associate, although I'm American citizens, but I wouldn't want to represent any governments because that's not my job.
I was told that when you go through China now, and in the developing rural areas, you see a lot of half-built buildings standing vacant. Now, I'm not talking about the multi-story buildings, okay, but just small structures all over the place. And one of my Chinese friends said this to me, and I just wonder if you know any better than I do. He says, oh no, we're developing so fast that, putting it in American terminology, eminent domain is big in China, because when they put the infrastructure in the roads, they just go in and take the land and say, I want it. And they fundamentally buy the land from you. But if you have land, they'll give you $10 for it. If you have some sort of structure on that land, like a half-built house, you'll get $15 for it. Do you think there's any truth to that?
I don't have a clear answer.
Have you ever heard that?
No.
Okay.
No.
All right. I was with represented China, and you know how they are.
We have about 15 minutes. Organizing a global economic outlook and creating of regulatory economic environment. 16th annual sponsor grant. Thank you very much on behalf of the